Hey everyone, it's Brandon from Top10Gamer.com. Hope you guys are doing great. Today we have something pretty special for you. We're going to take a look at 6 PC builds from $1,250 to $1,500 price range. And we're going to take a look at Haswell versus Skylake versus Haswell e-builds. So we're going to compare them all and kind of see what the give and take, what you give up to do a Skylake build versus sticking with a Haswell one if you are in this price range. So I want to jump right into the builds because we have so much to discuss, and the best way to do that is just to bring up all 6 builds together so that we can see them and just talk about them. As you can see, for our $1,250 build, we first start out with the i5-4690K. Now the goal here is to make a build for $1,250 or around that, give or take a little bit, where the build is going to include a 980 Ti. We are not aiming for 1080p gaming here. We are aiming for 1440p gaming or 4K gaming. So keep that in mind because you might rearrange your budget differently based on whether or not you're just going to 1080p. There are people that are happy to play 1080p. And then there are those who want to push frames, and not only push frames, but do it at a higher resolution. So this is what we're aiming here in the $1,250 category. As you can see, I've got a build for those who aren't going to overclock, and it's notably cheaper, more like $1,225 versus the $1,300 standard Haswell build. I'm recommending the Asus Z87 Pro here. That's a motherboard that's easily upgraded through USB flash BIOS, but a lot of them already come upgraded, so you don't even have to necessarily worry about it. Obviously, if you're not going to overclock, you don't need a stock cooler, so you don't have to pay for that as well. So that's another big savings. There's a limited difference here in FPS going from an overclocked CPU to a non-overclocked CPU. There is a difference. But in terms of overclocking, now when we jump to the Skylake CPU here, in the i5-6600K versus the i5-4690K, yeah, you're going to get that 2 to 8% frame difference when you're just running it standard. But when both of these are overclocked, the difference is pretty minimal. But what other differences then do we have? Well, if we're trying to stick to the $1,250 budget, we can't go with the 980 Ti if we get the Skylake. Now, this is just purely hypothetical. You don't have really more than like $1,250 up or down to work with on a $1,250 build. And as you can see, for the i5-6600K, we have to go with the 980, which is going to be a much bigger drop in frames than, say, you change just the processor from a Haswell to a Skylake. So what would this cost? Well, as you can see at the bottom, the cheapest total after rebate, it would cost about $1,400 with the 980 Ti versus the $1,300 for the Haswell. So is it worth the $100 extra to go with Skylake here? I think personally that I would do that if I could, but I know that people have budgets, and if you're not an overclocker, it's a much bigger difference going from that $1,200 to the $1,400. So that's something to consider there as well. All right, for our $1,500 builds, we have a Haswell build with no overclocking. We have a Haswell E build and a Skylake build. A little bit more diversity in our builds here. First off, the Haswell build with no overclocking. You get an i7-4790, great processor. Again, we're going to go to that Asus Z87 Pro. That's going to be my motherboard of choice here because it's so cheap after rebate, under $100 for a motherboard that was $200 just last year. And 8 gigabytes of G-Skill Ripjaws, so you're still sticking to the DDR3 here. So overall, this is going to be much cheaper. We're using a stock cooler. So for our $1,500, we also work a 3 terabyte HGST DeskStar hard drive in, as well as a 250 gigabyte Samsung 850 EVO. We've also upgraded the case here to the Phanteks Info Pro versus the Corsair 200R, a much better case here. In my opinion. So that's what you get if you're not overclocking, and I don't recommend going to a Skylake or a Haswell E if you're not an overclocker. I just don't really see the benefits yet. There are going to be some Skylake SKUs coming out soon that are for people that don't overclock, and that might be maybe the main thing to think about here. If you're in the $1,500 price range, you don't want to overclock. I don't see why you wouldn't wait for Skylake right there. Now, on the other hand, maybe the more relevant builds here is the Haswell E build versus the Skylake. You have the i7 5820K with its 6 cores versus the i7 6700K. Now, stock, the i7 5820K is going to be a little bit slower than the i7 6700K, but if you overclock both of these processors, what you get is very similar performance, but an extra 2 cores from the i7 5820K. So consensus across the board from many fronts, if you're doing rendering or any kind of other work where you need the multitasking, where you need those extra 2 cores, and we have DirectX 12, which a lot of games are going to be able to take advantage of those 2 extra cores. The consensus here is that the i7 5820K is still the better deal. Now, it is a little bit more expensive than the i7 6700K, more like that $389 range versus about $340. So you're paying $59 more for your processor. You may pay a little bit more for your motherboard here. And that's why this build comes in a little bit more expensive. And I would say overall, most times it would actually come in a little bit more expensive than it shows in this chart. The Haswell E versus Skylake build. But I happen to get very good deals this month on a number of things, including the motherboard, the ASRock X99M here. But as you can see, we've only got a price difference of $25. And again, there are some other differences between the Haswell E and Skylake platform, but overall, I think that there are more similarities than differences. And in terms of future-proofing, you're not going to feel a lot of difference. You're not going to feel like you're missing a lot by going with that Haswell E rather than Skylake board. All right, so those are the 6 builds that I was going to bring to you. I think there's something there that appeals to just about everyone. Now, again, if you're not playing in 1440p, if you're not trying to push beyond 60 hertz, there's a lot of other decisions that you can make here. There may be a lot of other things that may be more important to you. Storage could be one of that. Having 16 gigabytes of RAM. I think that's the first upgrade that a lot of people would make for all of these builds. And I recognize that deficit, and I think that a lot of people in this price range would definitely work that into that build. Other things to talk about, we want to talk about why we went with the 980 and the 980 Ti here. If you want all that information, I go into depth in it on my website. I don't want to make this video too long, but for every video that we do, I put an information card up in the upper right-hand corner. You guys can go and you can go check out the website. Again, there's a ton of information. There's also a poll there on whether you guys think that you should upgrade to Skylake or stick with Haswell or stick with Haswell E. And so I'd love to know your opinion there as well. Anyway, I'm up for any questions that you have. Go to forum.top10gamer.com if you want to ask me there. You can also ask me in the discussion area below. You can also join our community at facebook.com/top10gamer. And don't forget to tweet me at top10gamer. Hope you guys are having a great day, and we'll see you next time.